the story of the red machete used by Rick Grimes himself and used to brutally kill Gareth's men. In Season 5.
We didn't want to waste the bullets. I already made you a promise.
Hey everyone, it's Jack Hapson here, and this is a brief retelling of the 4th webisode of the zombie series The Walking Dead. As soon as this video gets 100 likes, I'm releasing a sequel. Enjoy watching it. At the onset of the zombie apocalypse, a young man is running through a hardware store as a walker chases him, stopping to grab a red-handled machete on the wall. He struggles to rip it out of its packaging while fending off the walker. After freeing it from the packaging, he triumphantly stabs it into the walker's chest, which has no effect. The young man is quickly set upon and eaten, while a family scavenging the store at the same time sees what's happened and retrieves the weapon before leaving. The father, David, and his 2 daughters, Alyssa and Mandy, spend time scavenging to survive, and David demonstrates how the machete can be used to effectively kill walkers. Seeing that Mandy is interested in what's happening, David gives her the machete for protection. In a training montage, Mandy learns to use the weapon effectively on a stump, while the family's supplies dwindle and Alyssa listens to her CD player. Upon realizing that their food stocks have run out, David leads a foraging mission to a nearby store, but as they run to escape, walkers pursue them before grabbing Alyssa by the hair and devouring her, prompting Mandy to scream in response. Soon after, her father cuts her hair short in order to ensure that the same thing doesn't happen to her. The despairing Mandy and David build a grave for Alyssa, and continue to train and catch fish from nearby rivers and creeks. At some point, David also carves Mandy's name into the handle after she saw him carve Alyssa's gravestone. Sometime later, while building an alert system to warn them of approaching walkers, David is bitten by a walker he tied up when it is able to loosen its bonds. Mandy runs back to find her father and is horrified to discover his wound when he reveals it. David later succumbs to his wounds, and Mandy stabs him to prevent him from reanimating. She later builds a second grave alongside Alyssa's. Going back home afterwards, Mandy passes the walker, still tied up in front of their house, and goes inside while setting the machete down in her room. She is startled when a group of 3 men approach the house, setting off the alert system she and David had installed. Mandy hides while one of the survivors enters the house, roots around her room, and takes the machete and backpack before leaving. The survivor that took the machete, Derek, eventually separates from his 2 companions. He opens the backpack and discovers Alyssa's former CD player, which he uses while cleaning the dinged up and blood-stained machete with baking soda and water. He later wraps red tape around the machete's handle, covering Mandy's name, before a female walker ambushes and kills him after he stabs it through the chest. The walker, now with the machete embedded in her chest, wanders the Georgia countryside for many months, joining and leaving packs of walkers and losing an arm in the process. Sometime afterwards, while wandering alone, the walker gets punched in the face and knocked down by Joe, the leader of the Claimers. Joe pulls the weapon out of the walker's chest and yells, "Claimed," before dispatching it. Joe and the Claimers pillage the countryside, roaming through camps and picking up supplies, and watching fellow survivors get devoured while they stand back and watch dispassionately. A while later, Joe, Tony, and the rest of the Claimers interrupt a pair of thieves attempting to steal from their camp, and chop off the male thief's hand before executing them both. Joe packs the machete into his bag just before he goes to intercept a group traveling along nearby train tracks, revealed to be Rick Grimes and other members of his group. In an animated montage, Rick discovers the weapon in Joe's bag, along with other supplies, and carries it with him for several weeks, using it to kill Gareth and the hunters in the church used by Father Gabriel, holding it while performing a mercy kill on Officer Lamson in Atlanta and having it with him in the abandoned barn when walkers attempt to break in during a heavy rainstorm. The weapon is eventually brought to Alexandria, where it is placed in the town's armory. The machete is later among the weapons seized by the Saviors during their first visit to collect supplies in Alexandria, after being glimpsed by Negan and other members of the Saviors. The weapon and others are brought to Gerald, a worker in the sanctuary's arsenal. Recognizing the potential usefulness of the weapon and being disillusioned with his surroundings, Gerald decides to flee from the saviors. After spending time trying to survive on his own, he is shot and killed by an unknown party while fleeing from them. Gerald later reanimates and wanders off, leaving the machete which he was using as a last-ditch weapon behind. More time passes, and the machete stays embedded in the grass as various groups of survivors and walkers pass by it in the distance. Eventually, the weapon is found by Mandy, now older and wiser. She picks up the weapon and stares at it intently before walking off with it. Upon removing the tape from the handle, she discovers that it's her old weapon and uses it to dispatch a pair of walkers passing by. Soon after, she walks back to her old family home, which has fallen into disrepair and damage after so much time. Inside, she looks through the old house before going back to her room and seeing her and her sister's sleeping bags on the floor. Suddenly, Mandy is surprised by a walker, which leaps at her and causes her to drop the machete. After fighting it off, Mandy recovers the machete and finally kills it, having achieved a measure of peace after her father and sister's deaths. Mandy walks back to their graves and embeds the machete in front of their tombstones, before walking off to parts unknown. Sometime later, an unseen figure walks up to the machete and recovers it before walking off.